In today's macro photography tutorial, we're here in a gin distillery because they have an amazing selection of botanicals, which I think will look really, really cool up close under the macro lens. Stick around and I'll get started in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome back to another macro photography tutorial where today we are somewhere a little bit interesting. We're in a gin distillery. This is Louth Distillery, the home of Rumcat and Pin Gin. Now these guys run a gin school, so you can come here and distill your own gin, and part of that process involves choosing your own botanicals, and it's those botanicals that I'm interested in today. The very first thing that you see when you walk into the gin school is these racks and racks of botanicals. There's everything from citrus to spices. Everything's dried out and ready to go straight into one of the stills. And when you're doing the gin school up here, you get a still to yourself and you can choose all of the ingredients that you want to go into your particular gin. I found that really interesting. But what I'm interested in today is taking a closer look at those ingredients. So I've just grabbed Amy from the gin school because I don't know all that much about the making of gin, and I'm spoilt for choice with all of these different botanicals. So could you tell us a little bit about the significance of all of these different flavors in the making of gin, and maybe what's the most important one?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be a London dry gin, you have to be juniper dominant in flavour. So there's a couple of other rules, but from a botanical perspective, that's the key. So the juniper berry, whilst called a berry, is actually from the conifer family and is a seed cone. So if we grab one out for you here, there we go. You'll be able to, if you just smell it now and nothing's going on, doesn't smell of anything.
Yeah, it doesn't smell at all.
Then, so you wouldn't think that's going to do anything. If you crush that now in between your fingers, and then it smells like gin.
Oh, it does smell like gin.
It smells like
yeah.
gin. So when you get into a world of kind of flavoured gins and things like that, then legally they can't really be called London dries because they won't have that juniper dominance in the flavour. So that gin flavour, that really dryness comes from the unsuspecting juniper berry. If you open it up, you'll see inside that it's actually where it's from the conifer family, you'll see that it's actually a seed cone inside rather than a berry. And as you open it up, obviously all of that smell and that aroma is coming out.
Well, that's really interesting because we can start off with taking a look inside a juniper berry, because that I can see even with just my naked eye, even when it's not in front of the camera, I can see that that's really interesting.
If you're ever out in a bar, you'll quite often get people sprinkle juniper berries in your gin and tonic. If they have not squeezed them, as you will know from this experiment we've just done, that's not going to add anything in there. So if you get them in there and you want to add a big kind of hit of some extra gin flavour, then just give them a little squeeze and you'll just release all of those aromas.
If they're not squeezed, does it mean they're doing it wrong?
Well, it just means they're not really adding anything. So visually, they look great, but from a flavour perspective, they're not really doing anything in there because obviously, as we've just proved, you don't get anything until you break them open.
Well, there you go. Pro gin tips from Pro Gin Amy. Thank you very much.
There we go.
So I'm really spoilt for choice on macro subjects in this place. We've got quite literally too many botanicals to choose from. I'm not going to be able to shoot all of them today, but I'm going to choose a few. We've got a whole list here, all categorized into what kinds of flavors and properties the gin will get if you use certain different botanicals. So I've grabbed down from the shelf initially some apple and some pear halves, and I've got some pink peppercorns as well, all of which I think will look really, really interesting up close, especially because they're all dried out. So the very first thing that I've done is grabbed some of these pink peppercorns. They're really lovely in colour and they look really nice against this wooden table. I'm not having to use any particular shooting surface because all of the surfaces up here are already really nice to shoot against, and I think that rustic wooden look looks really nice with these Botanicals as well. So my pink peppercorns, I've laid just a few of them down on the wood, and I'm shooting them really close up using my reversed lens setup. So this is a reversed 24mm lens on a set of extension tubes. That's a really cheap way to get a lot of magnification without having to buy a dedicated super macro lens. I've also added a little bit of lighting, you'll notice. So this is the Adaptalux Studio on a mini tripod, and I've plugged in 2 different lighting arms. In fact, the lighting arms are the same. I've got 2 lighting arm S's, but the difference here is that I've got a pink color filter on the end of one of these lights and a white diffuser on the end of the other. I think that dash of pink light in the background really helps to tie in the table with the pink peppercorns. I'd say they're more red than pink, but the pink light works really well to tie everything together. So moving on, we've got some dried lemon slices. Now these smell absolutely amazing, which is something that all of these Botanicals have in common so far. They all smell absolutely delightful. But these lemon slices are really interesting because they're slightly translucent. So I've shot lots of fruit before. I'll link to a good tutorial up in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you want to go and see some fresh fruit. But these being all dried out, their structure is slightly different, and it's really interesting to see what happens when you properly dry out fruit like this. I want to shine a little bit of light through these slices and illuminate some of that structure within the fruit. So that's exactly what I've done here, using my macro subject holder just to hold a little slice of lemon, and then shining a single white diffused lighting arm through that lemon has revealed all of that structure and brought a lot of the color as well. So when you're shooting small, obscure items like all of these fruits and different botanicals, hibiscus flowers and things like that, capturing that detail is really difficult because you'll have a very shallow depth of field when you get up close to your subject. And that's where focus stacking comes in. My setup today is built for focus stacking, manual focus stacking using a manual stacking rail. So that's this part here that goes between the tripod and the camera. This is just a bog standard manual focusing rail. That just means that I can move my camera forward and back through my image. I also have a shutter release cable here for ease. That means that I can take my photos without having to touch my camera and potentially shake my image. This means that I can afford a little bit of a slower shutter speed if I need it, but more importantly, it will mean that everything stays in place during my stack. I'm going to be moving my camera slowly through my image, taking photos as I go, and then I'll be putting all of those images into some software that will stack them all together and create the perfect focused image. That's going to be critical for a lot of these subjects. I want to capture as much detail in all of these dried out bits and bobs so that I can really show off the structure and the color within. So as it turns out, even things that you wouldn't expect to be that transparent can be transparent with enough light. We've got some dried raspberries here. Again, they smell delicious, but I've just placed one down on the table and placed a white lighting arm S just behind the raspberry, shining through into the center of the fruit. And that's making it look almost cavernous, lit from within. I also did the same thing with some bay leaves, just shining light through them to pick up all of that detail and structure on the inside of the leaf. We've shot a lot of leaves before, but dried out ones in perfect condition like these are not easy to find in your back garden. So this really is a treasure trove of textures and colors. Of course, not everybody has a lovely, friendly distillery right on their doorstep to come and play around with botanicals. But as you'll notice, many of these are simply just dried out versions of very common fruits and leaves and spices that you can absolutely find and shoot yourself at home. The advantage here is that they're all in one spot and it's a lovely environment to shoot in, so it was worth packing up a little bit of photo gear and coming out for a location shoot. And packing up and coming out with some lighting and a camera is not as difficult as you might expect. Obviously, I wanted to have quite a variety of lighting arms and colors and options to shoot with. I didn't quite know what I'd be shooting today, so I did bring quite a lot of gear. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Adaptalux Studio actually comes in a shipping box with a nice little handle, and everything inside here is nicely packed away. So all I've done is put all of my Adaptalux Studio gear, lighting arms, filters, and control pods back into the box and brought it down with me along with my camera bag. It's nice and lightweight, super portable, so you can take it pretty much anywhere that you need to go. And if you find some interesting things to shoot, like my botanicals today, then you can absolutely just whip it out of the box and get shooting. So then guys, I've had a fantastic shoot here at Louth Distillery today. They were kind enough to let me come and play around with all of their lovely botanicals and get some macro photos. But not only that, this whole place is just visually stunning. Just some normal photography here would be amazing as well. They've got those huge stills and the tiny little stills here used for their gin school. I will link down in the description to Louth Distillery and the gin school in case you fancy coming for an evening of, well, there's a lot of drinking of gin as well, but making your own gin, going through those botanicals, smelling them all and choosing the recipe for your own gin, and then of course distilling it right here on the tables. You can also choose the name for your gin, and I'm going to be giving all of my used botanicals to Amy, and she's going to put together an Adaptalux gin for us. But I want you guys to suggest a name for that gin. Put it down in the comment section and we'll choose our favorite. And of course, I'll let you know how our gin tastes. I'm not sure whether it will be lovely or not, because I've been mostly picking my botanicals based on how they look rather than how they taste, but we'll certainly let you know. For now though guys, that is all that I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.